how this same concept can be used to build wealth, significant wealth. And in fact, we're going to go through an example that will not only move his retirement date up by decades, but will provide over 5 times the retirement income, and it's all tax free.
Reverse velocity banking. There's a lot to set up here before we kind of jump right into what reverse velocity banking even means. Because obviously we have to spell out what is velocity banking first. But before we even do that, I just want to highlight an example. And this is my buddy Abel. Fairly young guy, 25 years of age, makes about $50,000 a year. And the objective from Abel's perspective is just to have a successful career. But I think what he's learning is there's nothing fun about working every day. There's nothing fun about bringing home this income and not having all of it accessible to you. It almost feels like you're in this hamster wheel that's never ending, right? And so the thought process is, okay, he's heard a lot about this freedom number thing. What would be his freedom number? And on top of that, can he put himself in a position to where he can literally fire his job? Now, that doesn't mean he'll stop working. It just means, can he put himself in a position to where he can actually go do what he wants to do versus what he has to do? Can he stop trading his time for money and maybe focus on purpose? Put himself in a position to where he has enough income being generated so that he now has a choice. How many of us wish we had a choice? And as you're watching this, yes, this gentleman's 25 years of age. Get it. But I want you to know that it was this example. I was 45 at the time when I learned of this example. I was 45, and what I realized was, even though I've had some great jobs throughout my life, I've worked for some great companies, Ford Motor Company, Target, Amazon. I've done some great things across my career. But what I realized was, even at the age of 45, there was a lot missing, because what I had learned was, if I didn't do something different, I was going to end up working for the rest of my life. And this example gave me, I'll call it the permission to adjust how we were looking at our finances and possibly do something different. So the first question, though, is, what is a freedom number? Like, what does that even mean? And ultimately, it's the moral of the story around your freedom number is, it's the amount of money you need to sustain your lifestyle. So how quickly can you receive or achieve the amount of money necessary, whether it's the amount of money to replace your expenses or the amount of money to simply replace all of your income, whatever you decide that number is. And then the question is, how long does that take? What does that look like? And let me make sure. Yep. And I was going to pull it up in Google from here, but I decided not to. If you were to just simply type into the in your favorite search engine, how to calculate your freedom number, there's all sorts of stuff that comes up, but they all hinge around the same concept. And it's right here. It's your annual expenditures times the number 25. So your annual expenditures, whatever you decide that to be, times 25 equals your freedom number. And every single article that I reviewed, I'm not saying every article out there, but every single article that I reviewed, all highlighted the 4% rule. And over this last week, there's been a fair amount of discussion around the 4% rule, how it's mathematically accurate, but may not be necessary for you to be able to sustain retirement. But the bottom line is, every article that I watched, every article that I read, or video that I watched, every article that I read, every financial institution that offers a retirement calculator, all follow the same thought process. And it's the Trinity study. It's the study that was done to determine what's your safe withdrawal rate so you don't run out of money in retirement. And so when you're calculating the financial freedom number, it's all based off that 4% rule. So getting back to this gentleman, again, he's 25 years of age, and what he's decided to do is put away 10% of his income. So 25 years of age, making $50,000 a year, $50,000 a year, 10% of his income would be $5,000. So putting away $5,000 to go, whether it's a Roth IRA, company 401k, putting it away somewhere so that he could focus on building his freedom number. And then the remaining, that $45,000, that's what he needs. That's his annual expenditures. So even though I would say There's probably some cash flow in there. The thought process is everything else. I want to be able to receive or achieve this $45,000 annually. And that is my freedom number. So this is his decision. This is not something that I suggested. It is simply what he wants to do. Take the remaining income, $45,000, and generate that freedom number around that. And when you multiply that times 25, you end up with about 1.1 million. So the question is, okay, if 45,000 times 25, how long would it take to achieve that 1.1 million as the freedom number, as the total nest egg available to him to be able to achieve, I'll call it his moment where he can potentially fire his job, that moment where he can achieve the income that he wants to be able to have the lifestyle that he needs. And again, we're talking about $45,000. How long would it take in traditional retirement vehicles for him to be able to achieve that 1.1 million is the question. So there's a few ways we can go about it. I can tell you, or we can also calculate it ourselves using the calculator to my right. Either way, but the bottom line is the goal is 1.1 million. And the question is, for a 25-year-old putting away $5,000 a year, $5,000 a year is 417, like 416 point something, $417 a month. So if you were putting away $417 a month, how long would it take? Again, whether you use the Vanguard calculator, Fidelity, Morgan Stanley, it doesn't matter which calculator you use. They all say right around the same thing. So the question is, how long would it take putting away $417 a month for a 25-year-old? How long would it take for him to achieve $417,000 in a traditional retirement vehicle? I'm not talking about a secure compound interest account. I'm not talking about premium finance strategy. I'm talking about in a traditional retirement vehicle. How long would it take for that $417 to turn into 1.1 million? So I just did it for 30 years. So from 25 to 35, what does that look like? Well, 25 to 35 is not quite there. 25 to 35 says he's got a nest egg of about 654,000, income of about 26. So he's still got some work to do. So let's see how far we end up having to go. So I'm going to quickly bypass the 65. Let's go to 67. 1.7 million. So I went too high. All right. So let's back this thing down. So from age 25 to age 62, age 25 to age 62. So that's, 37 years? It would take 37 years to accumulate 1.1 million in a nest egg. And that 1.1 million, based off the 4% rule, translates to or around the $45,000 a year that this gentleman was wanting to be able to create. So the odds of him retiring early, not so much. And this does not take into consideration that he's making more money, right? This does not take into consideration that throughout the years, his lifestyle may change. This is assuming starting from ground zero with $45,000 a year, what would it take for him to hit his freedom number? And again, we're talking, was that 32 or 37? What did I say? 37. It will take him 37 years to be able to achieve that number. So if it takes 37 years to accomplish this goal, is there anything else missing in this equation? Meaning, do you guys notice of this 1.1 million being the freedom number, is there anything missing? And if you've been on any of our lives, especially over these last few weeks, we've been harping on this a lot. And that is, just because your freedom number might look one way based off today's income, what none of these, I'll call it vehicles that we're using to assess what that income should be in the future, none of them are taking into consideration inflation. And so I want to just acknowledge the fact that this 1.25 million does not include inflation. So whatever 1.25 million looks like 37 years from now, can we just agree that it's not sufficient?
Yeah, and how to invest also brought up a good point. It also doesn't include the taxes.
That's right. That's right. Because in a traditional retirement, traditional retirement vehicle, we've been, I'll call it conditioned to do what? Defer our taxes. So what that's saying is in 37 years, Abel has created an open checkbook for the government to charge him whatever the tax rate is 37 years from now. So you are absolutely correct. And so he reached out. He had a few goals. One, find the fastest way to freedom. And clearly 37 years isn't that. So the question is, hey, Donnell, can you help me get there faster? And then also I talk a lot about structure. You just can't get or do anything with anyone. So what are those vehicles, and are those vehicles structured properly to be able to achieve that goal? And then the last one is avoid paying for expensive courses, coaching, and all of that other nonsense that comes along with this. Meaning there's enough content that we share on a regular basis that should allow most, if not all of us, to be able to educate ourselves. Now, there's some details that I don't go into. There are some roles that I don't play. There are some things that I don't highlight because I am not a tax attorney. I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This is my opinion. But there's enough information out there to fully get educated on how to accomplish a lot of these things. And everything that I'm going to share with you today, I don't think there's anything new that I'm really sharing with you. I think it's really more about how it's structured, how it's used, how it's leveraged. And but the concepts that we're going to walk through are not new. And so when he reached out, I think he was looking for math, like mathematically, what does it look like for him to be able to hit his financial freedom number earlier? And what I simply stated was, how much are you looking to be able to have in a future date? Well, $45,000 at the moment. Okay, then the objective is to create enough leverage based off that $45,000 to use that leverage to pay all your expenses. Meaning, once you have $45,000 worth of leverage available to you, you now have enough space to be able to pay your expenses. Why? You can use leverage dollars to be able to pay your expenses. There's nothing wrong with that. And then in addition, don't forget about inflation. We need to make sure that as we move down this journey, that I get it, 1.1 million is important, but it really should look a little bit different because we want to make sure we highlight or acknowledge or compensate for inflation. And I'm going to do so, but just to keep apples to apples and just to not, I'll call it, cause any additional confusion. What I wanted to do was do exactly what was asked. You want $45,000 a year? I'm going to get you $45,000 a year, and then we'll address that inflation piece. Waiting 37 years to be able to hit your freedom number is a no bueno. And what I shared with them was, if we do this right, if you structure this right, if you take the time necessary to be able to allow money to compound, build enough for you to have enough leverage to be able to go, I'll call it, pay your bills and hit your freedom number, I'm thinking more like 10 to 20 years. And I'm harping on the 10 because I think that's the point. That's this line where things shift. So what do I mean? Well, before I kind of get into that, I wanted to highlight something. We originally started this with what? Abel is putting away 10% of his income. That's how most of us, any of us who are planning for the future, there's usually some percentage of our income that we focus on. I talk with a lot of people, a lot of couples who are doing 70, 20, 10. 70% goes toward expenses, 20% is going towards the debts. That's where the first position or second position HELOCs come into play. And then that remaining 10% is going towards bills. And then as the debts are eliminated, you're freeing up cash flow. And because you're freeing up cash flow, that's now more money that you can put towards putting away in some secure compound interest producing vehicle or traditional retirement account to be able to build wealth. We all do it the same way. I do it this way. We all do it the same way. It's somewhere around, hey, I'm going to take 90% of my income and do what I normally do. That remaining 10% I'm putting away. And as I free up more cash flow, then I make adjustments. And for those of you who have 2 income households, sometimes it's even, hey, I've got a spouse who hasn't been working, and now she is working, or now he is working. And so what we're going to do is use majority, if not all of the spouse's income to start a vehicle. So now it looks more like a 60-40 or a 50-50 maybe. But the bottom line is this is the traditional approach that we all use to be able to, I'll call it, put money in a vehicle that can help us. And in addition, if we were to look at that mathematically, meaning there is a mathematical equation that kind of speaks to this process. And it's the wealth equation. You've seen this equation before, or if you've been on this channel at all, you have seen this equation. A, we have to pay ourselves first. The one, starting today, the plus. We have to reduce risk. So the plus is about security. The money has to be secure. And then you get that money compounding. That's the R. And then there's the X. You exponentially grow this money, and now you're able to increase reduce compound cycles, which would allow your money to double on its own as quickly as possible, producing the right amount of income or the most amount of income possible. And so there are very few vehicles that hit all of these buttons. But usually what we do is before we pay ourselves first, we do a few things. Let's see here. So before we pay ourselves first, and using this example, Abel makes $50K. So we take that $50K and we pay our bills, right? Whatever they are. And then we pay our debts. And in doing velocity banking, what happens? There's a certain amount of cash flow left over. And then we take that cash flow and whatever's left over is what we usually end up getting compounding in a vehicle that's going to make us money. And in this case, it's 10%, or specifically 5,000. So between all the bills, the debts, and the additional cash flow and trips and cars and whatever else is going on in Abel's life, what's left over is about $5,000. And that's the amount that ends up being used to go into this vehicle. And then we take this 5,000 and we get it compounding. That's traditionally how this works. And here's where I just want to introduce a different perspective. What if we just simply looked at this a little bit differently? Instead of paying all of our bills, from here, what if we were able to get all of our income into a compound interest producing vehicle? Take all of our income, put it right into the vehicle right off the bat. And then as money starts to grow in this vehicle, we then pay our bills from the leverage. Now, this concept, I'll call it, a little bit different. But the moral of the story is, what if? This is the question I want you to ask yourself. What if you could take all of your income, dump it into a secure compound interest producing vehicle, and then as that income starts to grow, as that income starts to compound, as that income starts to build, you then pay all of your bills from the leveraged money. And if you think this concept is, I'll call it outside the box, it's really not. If you think this concept is something that you aren't able to do, it absolutely is. Matter of fact, there's a whole lot of people that currently do this today. So when you get time, go back to your favorite search engine and type into the search bar. And I didn't even finish it out before it even popped up. It was Buffett pays less taxes than. Put into your favorite search bar, Buffett pays, as in Warren Buffett, Buffett pays less taxes than. And there's this, I keep seeing it as a meme. There's this saying, I've seen social media people talk about it, but there's this saying that Warren Buffett says often, and that is, he pays less taxes than his secretary. And so then the question has to become, how? How is it possible for Warren Buffett to pay less taxes than his secretary? What is it that he knows that maybe we don't? What is it that he's doing that we're not? And the assumption is he must be doing something that, because he's a billionaire, he's allowed to do that maybe we aren't. And the truth is, none of that is the case. Everything that Warren Buffett does, we can do. It's just a question of what vehicles are we're using. And Warren Buffett's been doing this a long time. How long has he allowed his money to compound to put himself in a position to be able to do so? What came out of this is the reason why, because I thought I had the second page to this, but it looks like it didn't pull over. The reason why Warren Buffett pays less taxes than his secretary is very simple. The money that he spends is leveraged money. The money that he spends meaning he'll pay more in capital gains, but is actually less in income tax. And so therefore he doesn't mind paying capital gains tax on an investment. And then the other piece is he only uses leveraged dollars, meaning when he goes to the store and he goes to Home Depot and he buys whatever he buys, he is not using his cash out of his checking account. He's not using his cash from his income. What he uses is leveraged dollars. And what we know about leveraged dollars, if you've ever had a 401k, what we know about leveraged dollars is you are not taxed on the use of leveraged dollars. So the point of all this is this. If we can get to a point where our leveraged dollars or the ability to leverage dollars is enough or meets or exceeds what we need to maintain our lifestyle, we too can use these leveraged dollars to pay our bills, and therefore we have access to all of our income to do other things. And so again, this is just a paradigm shift. We are used to doing things a certain way. Everyone follows this path. We are currently following this path. But the goal is to get here, meaning, yes, right now we're paying our bills from the income that comes in, and what's left over, we get compounding into a secure compound interest producing vehicle. But clearly this number is lower than it should be because the objective would be to get 100% of our income into this vehicle and then pay bills from here. And so the moral of the story around that is how? How do you do this? How is it possible if I'm making $50,000 a year like Abel, how is it possible to get all $50,000 into a vehicle? I can't do that tomorrow. Like, how do I pay my bills? And again, you've been watching this channel. We know we talk about cash value life insurance policies. Name the cash value life insurance policy that you can put $50,000 in and get $45,000 out tomorrow to be able to pay bills. It just, the math doesn't math. So how? Okay, this does take time. This is not something that you can do tomorrow, but what you can do is put yourself in a position such that when it's time, when it's ready, you can use those leveraged dollars to pay those bills. So what we're talking about is reversing how we normally do things. Velocity banking. The thought process is the concept that I'm referencing isn't new. You've seen this before. The thought process, though, we're just going to use the concept of velocity banking a little bit differently to put ourselves in a position so that we can use our leveraged dollars to pay bills. And again, my only ask of you is just to keep an open mind. It's the strategy that I want you to take hold of. It's the concept that I want you to take hold of. There are many ways to 10. There are many ways around how we do this. So I'm just going to walk you through one aspect of the how. There are an infinite number of ways we can go about it. But before we jump into reversing velocity banking, we have to first talk about velocity banking. So what is velocity banking? Velocity banking is the concept of all your income comes in, it goes into a checking account. Normally we pay bills from this checking account and what's left over is our cash flow. But the concept behind velocity banking is money comes into your checking account. We identify a debt tool. This debt tool is where all bills are going to be paid. And when all bills are paid from this debt tool, what's happening is you have the ability to use a dollar multiple times. What do I mean? If for this gentleman, if he's making $45,000, if he's got $45,000 in income coming in and he dumps all $45,000 onto this debt tool, clearly he still has to pay bills. So he's going to pay bills from this debt tool. But what ends up happening is his cash flow. What's left over? What's left over after bills are paid is what sits on this debt tool. And that cash flow, because it lives on the debt tool, what happens is the balance on the debt tool continues to drop. And as that balance continues to drop, what you guys traditionally hear from me is, then what? So just because we've paid down the debt on this debt tool, what are you going to do now with this newfound cash flow? Because the thought process is this: when you have that cash flow, if you don't put it to work, if you don't get your money compounding, the likelihood of you getting yourself back into the same position that caused the debt to become higher is likely to happen again. So the thought process is when this debt tool has a low balance on it, we then take that cash flow and put it to work. We take that cash flow and put it into a wealth building tool. So the concept looks like this. We're taking income or cash flow from the debt tool and moving it to the wealth tool to end up generating wealth over time. And we've talked about many different options. There's real estate. There's a secure compound interest account. There's premium finance strategies. There's there's a few different types that will allow you to place your money from or take the cash flow from the debt tool that you have as you reduce that debt and move it into a wealth generating tool that is secure. that you're going to pay yourself first, get your money compounding securely, and then exponentially start to grow it. Well, if we're talking about reverse velocity banking, what does that look like? And it looks something like this. Again, income come up. Oh, sorry. Income comes in, and when that income comes in, it still comes into the checking account. But what do we do with it? We take all of our income and move it to a wealth generating tool. What ends up happening is cash value starts to grow on this tool. And as cash value starts to grow in this tool, we take that cash value and we use it as a line of credit to do what? Pay our bills. So what's happening is you're now using leveraged money to pay your bills. And in this case, if it's 45K, if 45K is going into this debt tool, how much of the 45,000 that we put in is actually being used to pay for or to use to pay these bills? How about none of it? Meaning, when I put 45,000 into the debt tool, into the wealth tool, when I put 45,000 into a properly designed cash value life insurance product and it's building cash value, even when I leverage money from that cash value, the money that I originally put in is still working for me. The dollar amount inside of this wealth tool does not change, but I'm able to use that leveraged money to do what? Then pay bills. And then what ends up happening is over time, I'm able to generate passive income as a result. So again, the difference between velocity banking and what we're talking about here is simply this. We're taking our income and moving it to a wealth tool, and then turning right around and moving that money from the wealth tool, meaning leveraging that money inside of that wealth tool to then pay our debts as though it's a debt tool. So again, all we're doing is following the same process, but instead of the income going into a debt tool first, we pay all of our bills from there. The thought process is we shift all of our income as we can and move it into some wealth generating tool and leverage it. And then we use those leverage dollars to then pay bills. And again, I left a lot out.
Yeah. And we have to be able to simplify it for just rolling it out for the first time, and then we can go and get more granular. But here's why this made sense to me, that it was reverse velocity banking. Because in velocity banking, you're leveraging your cash flow to help reduce debt. That's not going to go into savings account. It doesn't make sense, right? Because it's not doing anything for you sitting in a savings account, where it will be doing something for you if it's sitting on your debt tool. That's the whole point. Sitting on the debt tool, right?
Right. Reducing the amount of interest that you're accruing over time, right, sitting on the debt tool. Absolutely.
Right. And so we use these icons when we're explaining velocity banking. And so I wanted to try to mirror the same icons and where they would be in the strategy. So that's what I hope that everyone can see. I hope it's obvious, but I just wanted to say it in case it wasn't. Point is that the cash flow becomes cash value, right?
That's right.
So your income is sitting on your wealth tool in the same way that your cash flow sits on your debt tool. Because if it's sitting in a savings account, if it's just going out to bills, it goes to bills and then it dies. It does not, you can't use it multiple times, it's done, right? But we talk about how to use the same dollar multiple times, especially in a velocity banking journey, and how these tools can be leveraged in different ways to actually accelerate your results, right? This is the same thing. So that's why, to me, if you understand the velocity banking concept, then you're going to get why this is so powerful, and why you're going to ask yourself, why weren't we taught how to do these things? And why were we not taught how to leverage our dollars? But I'm now on the same note. This is why people are building wealth and they aren't paying taxes on it, because they just have access to information like this. So that's all I want to say. Cash value, cash flow. I want you to just, for a moment, think of where your leverage is in velocity banking, and then you'll be able to see it inside of this strategy too.